Let's talk about some of the most creative mechanisms teams have come up with for intaking, indexing, and outtaking fuel in the rebuild season. What does end up coming out important in autonomous that we saw from this week 0 event is the importance of... I'm Brogan Pratt, and I've been teaching robotics design for over a decade now. And today we're going to take a look at some of the prototypes that are showing promise for the rebuild season, as well as take a look at the week 0 competitions and see how some actual matches start to happen. So first up here, we've got FRC 2399. And they've just got a large rotating surface here as their sort of hopper and indexing mechanism. The theory behind this system here is it looks like if they can spin this carbon fiber plate fast enough, that the fuel will push around the edge to be able to then move back up. One thing that might make this a little bit more successful is having your centrifugal force spin wheel itself spinning far faster to push it closer to the edge, as well as having a little more friction on this bottom surface and a little less friction on these edges. Sometimes polycarbonate can actually be quite sticky as a surface. So having some sort of lower friction surface might help this be a little bit more successful, but I thought it was a really interesting design in any case using some of that. We've also got Team FRC Robotics here, and there's some tests up and over the bump here. One thing I wanted to highlight on this team here is they added a little temporary lid to the top of their robot. And you can even see that as they go up and over that bump, that fuel is launching in and over the robots. I'm not sure that teams that are designing things with large hopper designs are thinking about things like this. We're also starting to see teams at this point in the rebuild season starting to make a bit of one or two strategies, being a very tall robot with a very large hopper, trying to fill up those 30 inches completely, or being a little bit shorter to be able to fit underneath that sort of low gate section as well, but accepting that your hopper is going to be a little bit smaller. So if you are planning on going up and over that bump, it might be something you want to consider of having fuel launching out, having some sort of lid that is able to retract and expand, depending on if you have a retractable intake and hopper. Next up here, we've got Team 5951 Makers Assemble. I don't want to highlight their hopper just because their hopper is both an intake as well as a hopper. And what it is doing is the intake is able to shift itself up and then push some of that fuel down closer to their actual outtake as well. So I think that having a sort of expandable hopper strategy is going to be a strategy that some teams are going to implement. I think it's going to be really useful to be able to pick up more on your robot than what is you're capable of. Now, one thing I do want to mention on expandable hopper strategy, as from FRC blog here from Robot Reminders, is that you can add up a lot of weight when it comes in when you're filled up and make sure you're still within your sizing restrictions, because what seems to be happening at the week 0 competition is that some of these polycarbonate side plates were really starting to flex out. And because they're flexing out, it actually caused some teams to go beyond their extension limits. What they were allowed to do made them go beyond their robot expansion limits. So keep that in mind if you are going to have an expandable hopper for this. We also got Maker Assemble again talking about their intake. And it really does seem like, again, like I was talking last week, picking an intake design, just rolling with it seems to be working well. But a lot of these large flat roller bars seem to be working really well. We've got Team Alarm Robotics 2079 here showing off one of their intakes here, and they've got a 4-bar and that their linkage is able to come down. It's a standard 4-bar mechanism to be able to put their intake down the ground and then pick itself back up to be able to move its hopper back in. Now, I wonder if they could add this as a way that as it comes down, expands their hopper, similar to what we saw from the Makers Assemble here, and then lift itself back up to be able to push some of that fuel back in. Might be an interesting way of being able to expand your hopper, get a little bit more space in there, and then moving on. Then we've got a couple different climbs here. I wanted to show off Team Hammerhead's 5000 here. In their autonomous climb here, they also managed to get a level 1 hang as well as a level 1 descension, again, after autonomous. So we've just got a couple little quick arms here. Lift them up, pull their arms back down, and then move back on. I think it's a really successful way of getting a pretty solid amount of points right at the end of their autonomous period as well. Remember, with his autonomous period, only 2 robots can score that inside of that section as well. Now then we've got a few different hand-over-hand climbers here. We've got Team 4265 showing off a little hand-over-hand here. They've got a little bit of a passive, well, it's not so much a passive arm, but a stationary arm that's able to tilt itself, lift itself up just a little bit so that they can get themselves onto their second arm before moving itself back on. I think as a rough prototype, it's a great place to go. One wondering I have is using an active claw here where they're using a second hook here really the best strategy? I think that it works well, but if we look at some more passive claw strategies like this team 3255 has done, or some of the quite a few Romanian team out of the FTC into the deep season for doing some hand-over-hand climbing, you've got a couple solid pins here, and that's what kicks these arms back up when you get yourself to that next linkage, and they automatically release themselves for the second claws to then be able to come up and pick itself up off again. I think it's a really interesting way. You can see that they've got a spring load system here where these claws are able to move out of the way as it comes up and lifts itself onto another section. So a hand-on-hand claw climb, at least in my opinion, seems to be a really solid way of lifting yourself up and keeping yourself within that height requirement for this season as well. Next up, let's take a look at a couple of shooters here. And again, we're starting to see delineation between teams that are going for a drum-based shooter or teams that are going for a turret-based shooter. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into some match analysis later, which one seems to be, at least at the initial points, playing things off. But I love seeing, FRC Robotics here showing off just some higher throughput. I don't believe they've done any tuning in their launcher here at all, but just to be able to get a much higher throughput going through and up into that hub. Obviously, they need a little bit more weight on their flywheel to get more of that range in there. But overall, drum-based shooting seems to be working really well. We've got FRC 2370 iBots showing off a shooting on the move. Again, you kind of got this mix of a turret-based system or a drum-based system. One thing that is going to be really critical, in my opinion, with the shooting on the move is the ability for your flywheel to adapt to rapid-based changes. And as we get more into the matches here, if you are a low robot with a turret versus a high robot here like 6328, you've got two very different strategies as far as a high robot versus a low robot. You might end up having some of your camera vision being blocked when you're looking at some of these April tags as teams are starting to play a little bit of defense. Something to consider as you move there, that having a drum-based shooter might be able to open up some of that more, might be able to have a little bit more of that throughput. But what both of these teams are showing is the importance of being able to be resilient in playing defense. And when we look at the week 0 event that happened, we see a lot of that happening up with playing defense against some of these. If you watch the Red Alliance over here, when we actually get started, when we watch the Red Alliance, now this doesn't play so much over in the autonomous period, but it does really start to play a lot in the teleop period. And in my opinion, I think this game really is going to be decided when it comes to the teleop period. I think you can get quite a few points within that autonomous period. We've got this team up here in the top right-hand corner, grabbing from that human player outpost to be able to get some of those in, be able to get their hopper a little bit loaded before moving up and launching a whole bunch. Now, what does end up coming out important in autonomous that we saw from this week 0 event is the importance of winning on that autonomous section. And the reason for that is that it does give your hub second access. And the reason you want that second access is because it gives you more time to be able to herd a lot of this fuel onto your side of the game as it goes further. So as we start moving this, blue is going to start with their hub being active for the first section because they were behind on that first autonomous section. You start seeing that blue is starting to herd and launch some of the fuel out into their own section. Same thing a little bit from the Red Alliance, a bit here. One thing you'll also see a lot that we've been talking about before is beaching. We've got quite a few teams in this week 0 are sort of yeeting themselves up and over, sending it, as Canadians would say, getting themselves up and over onto these fuel and then beaching themselves up on top, and they're not able to move, and it ends up quite a bit of reduction on time. But we're going to end up seeing our Red Alliance here is going to come up and start playing quite a bit of heavy defense against some of these bots. And even though both these bots, I believe there is a drum-based shooter over here and a turret-based shooter here, the importance of, as I was saying earlier, when you get hit, to be able to adjust your flywheel on the fly to be able to manage a lot of that. We can see more beaching happening up over here, but really that importance of being able to adjust that flywheel on the fly as you're getting hitting to be able to shoot while you're moving. I really do think that's going to be far more critical inside of this season, particularly with how much defense is going to be played, because there are no safe protected zones this season outside of your turret. Now, one thing I do want to mention here is take a look at this team's robot over here. We'll try to get around so we can see what their number is. But when it comes up to their time in that driver tail light, once they get off beached from 6328, they're really taking this time while the opposing alliance is open and starting to fill up their fuel, that they are really starting to hoard a lot of that fuel in over that side, and then watching that time tournament ticking down before it gets to the point where they are going to be active, and then they're going to start lining themselves up to be able to start firing in basically right when that timer kicks over and is now their section. What's interesting here is that you're not really going to know who is really in lead inside of these sections until the end of that second alliance swap with those hub activities. So while it does look like Blue Alliance has a much higher score, in reality, Red Alliance actually ends up coming ahead here in the end off of that first kind of sub swap here. Like we end up with 109 or 112 points over that 96. You also see that Blue Alliance starts shooting before their hub even becomes active. And I think that's going to be something that's also going to be critical here. Now we start seeing Red come up, start playing quite a bit of defense as they come in here. And as they start to push these other robots around on the Blue Alliance, it is a little bit confusing today because the bumpers are not the correct color. But it ends up making it quite difficult for some of these robots to go in. And despite what some teams are talking about, whether and the sort of conversations that are going on, whether it should be a barrel-based, drum-based shooter, whether it should be a turret-based shooter, I think that neither robot is really safe when it comes to defense. When realistically, in my opinion, what's going to end up making it for that defense is the ability to have a shooter that can adapt when you're moved quickly against. So if you are suddenly further away, you're suddenly 50 centimeters further away from the hub than you originally were, being able to adapt quickly to that hub, I think is going to be really important as those things shift and as those things move along. And also the importance of playing defense when it is your opposing alliance's hub's turn. You can see that if you can stop your alliance or the opposing alliance from being able to score points, it's just as good as scoring points for you. So perhaps even having a dedicated herder or a dedicated defense-based robot would actually be quite advantageous this season. It'll be really interesting to see where things start moving on in the future of the season with some of the more week one events and competitions start coming up. I'm curious on your thoughts on where you think the FRC season is going to go and where you think these metas are going to go. We think that larger hopper-style robots are going to start to dominate some of these things. We think that smaller, more agile turret-style robots can be a little more advantageous here, or a little bit of both. As well, how do you think teams are going to be able to get over some of that beaching? Because we saw even in this match, there was quite a bit of beaching that ended up happening along and sitting themselves up on top of that fuel, having a teammate having to come knock them up and over. It's definitely something to consider as the season goes by. If you've got a robot or match that you'd like me to take a look at for the next FRC Saturdays, got a submission form, you can do so down below. And as always, best of luck out there this FRC season.